All right, so let's get started working on our wood grain. The first thing I think we need to do is we need to lay in our base coat, which is our burnt umber wash. I'm going to grab a brush here. I would prefer a 2-inch brush, but I don't seem to have one that is ready to be used. So I'm going to jump to, I actually have some larger 4-inch and 3-inch brushes here, 4-inch brushes. So I'm going to use a 4-inch brush. And you can use a 2-inch if you like, even the 1-inch, but you'll have better results if you use a larger brush like a 2-inch. I'm going to grab some of my medium and throw it in here. And I'm going to grab my brush here and I'm going to drag that and kind of make a nice fluid paint. Saturate my brush up, the tips up a bit. And remember, we're going to go in a direction. We're not going to scumble. We're not going to do that. We're going to start off the canvas and we're going to start pulling through. That's still a little bit too dry brush. So we're going to start pulling a little more water through it. Mind you, it's a wash. So I can just kind of pull. You already starts feeling like wood grain just by doing this sort of effect. All right. So I'm going to start off and drag all the way through. All right. Got a hair in there. All right. So we'll leave that for a bit. Now, in the meantime, this is remember we said we're going to try to work wet on wet to allow for some of the bleed. You can see this is already starting to feel a little like wood grain. So this time I'm going to go in with my fun little brush here. Actually, before I do that, remember we set up our second layer is our area washes. So the yellow ochre and then a burnt umber again, a darker burnt umber. So I think what I'll do is I'll use that 1-inch brush I have here. And I'm going to add a little bit more glaze. And I'm going to bring in sort of my yellow ochre. Now, mind you, you can use your golden yellow, but make sure you add a little extra burnt umber to kind of knock it down a bit, right? So you can see as I mix this together, I have a brown, but it's a yellow brown. So I add a little more brown to this to kind of knock the yellow down a bit more. Okay. So this again is a wash, so I need to add some water to it. And I'm going to pick an area like through here, and I'm going to start pulling this through. I have a hair in the middle of this, which is irritating me. So sometimes if you get a hair that pulls off one of these, you can kind of scoop it with your brush and then dispose of the hair, and then you can go right back over that area and bring that color through. All right. So I'm going to bring some of this through. I'm not even going to be that straight about it. I'm going to create like a little wave within my wood grain. And I'm going to kind of pull that through. And I think I'm actually going to go a little more yellow. I'm getting a lot of glare here, so let me see if I can kind of, if I hold over the shadow here and the glare from the window, you can kind of start to see how this is starting to darken up. So I'm going to pull some more yellow through here. All right. All right, so I got some fun stuff going. This area is kind of a yellow area. Unfortunately, it's not quite coming through on the video as well as I'd like, is what I'm seeing, but hopefully you'll get a sense of this. Definitely already looks like wood grain. So what we can do now is, this is where we get to have fun with our fun little chopped up brush. We can dip a little bit in water, and I'm going to go into the pure burnt umber paint. I'm not going to add anything, any medium to it. I might add a touch of medium just to thin it out, because it seems to be a little thicker than usual. So I'm going to add a little bit more medium to it to kind of be a little more fluid. And here's what I like to do is I take this brush, and in my palette, I will tap it out. Tap, 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 tap. Kind of splay those hairs out in kind of this manner, right? Now we've already kind of adjusted our brush strokes before, so we're going to follow those. We're not going to cross anything. We're going to go right along the same path that we did earlier. So I'll start over here, and I'm going to pull and kind of wiggle a little bit, and maybe lightly, and I'm going to follow my path I did earlier, make my way across. And then I'll go right next to that. I flip my brush over just so I get a little variety. And I'm going to, again, start off the canvas, kind of pull, and I'm going to kind of wiggle it a little bit, and I can then pull all the way through. All right. If I want to create this sort of knot effect, I can start from one end, and I'm going to hold my brush sideways, and I'm going to push up and immediately pull right back down. I'm going to add some more paint because it's not really showing up. But you see how if I pull up and then pull back down, I start to get this sort of knot effect. Now, then you go outside of that, add more paint. I'm going to do it again. Pull up and then pull back down. All right. I might start down here to kind of pull along the wood grain so that it feels like it comes around the knot. And then on this side comes around the knot, goes off the page. Okay. Again, I have one of those silly little hairs. I hate this one of my only pet peeve about this type of paintbrushes. Their hairs sometimes come off. So I'm using just a little palette knife here to kind of scrape it off. Come on. All right. You can take something like a palette knife and then draw in some white areas. That is sort of an easy way to, you know, again, accentuate your little wood graining technique here. And I'm going to add a few of those. All right. All right. So I'm going to leave that a little bit. Now, I'm going to let this kind of dry. I know earlier I said I'm going to work wet on wet. In this case, I probably, at this point, I feel confident enough that I could probably dry. I can still play around with it if I want. Let's say I wanted to add a wider area of wood graining. Actually, I think I like it. I got a little bit of water. And I kind of like this idea of bringing in a wider line here. Give some variety. All right, so just kind of adjust a little bit. So I'm going to dry this, and when I come back, we'll put on our glaze on top of this to kind of, remember, we're going to make it cohesive. We're going to take all these layers of paint that are kind of sitting on top of each other. We're going to make it all feel like they belong together. So let me pause it for now, and in a minute, once this is dry, we'll come back and I'll show you this next step. Now that we have this all dry, we're going to go ahead and add our glazes on top. So that was our last step, because we've done we just started off with our burnt umber wash. We went ahead and did our area washes with sort of the yellow and sort of a dark dark burnt umber. We did some graining with our graining tool. We can even continue with scraping, or even going in with the edge of a brush and kind of tightening up some of the color so that it's a little more rich in this area, especially where I did my knot. I wanted this knot to feel like a radiation, kind of pattern. So it kind of bleeds out in this kind of spiky shape. And then the next level is to create a glaze. So we're going to, again, use the same color combination. I'm going to wet my brush here. I'm going to grab a whole bunch of medium, throw it in here, and add some of the burnt umber to it, and mix up a nice glaze. All right, so this is, it's going to carry the brown color but it's going to be see-through. Remember, we want that transparency. So I can glaze over all of this. Now, if I wanted a little darker area, what I can do is I can add a touch of black to this. Again, this is, remember, we add black to create a shade, and we add white to create a tint. And so in this case, I want to go a slight shade. So I'm going to add a touch of black to this to kind of darken it up, kind of a neutral, and that's fine because we have enough warmth in all this that this will be fine. So I'm pulling that black into my glaze mix. I'll wipe some of this off, and I'm going to pull this through. And I'm going to, on this half, I'm going to make this sort of my darker area. At first, it'll look kind of milky, and that's fine. As it dries, it'll get softer. You will need to test this, okay? This isn't something that just works right off the bat. Sometimes if you have just a little bit too much paint, it'll become opaque. It's just not going to shine through. But by doing this and doing a test, you can kind of get a feel for if that's going to work or not. You need a little bit less or glaze, a little bit less paint. So I'm going to keep working this out to kind of move the paint, move the glaze around to cover all of this. Remember, I'm still kind of pulling it in that same direction. I got a neat effect here. There was a weird bleed that happened here, and it's starting to create this little interesting, like almost a crack in the wood. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing with the yellow ochre. I'm going to a little bit of water, some glaze here, and I'm going to add the yellow ochre to this. Touch of that other glaze, that brown, kind of knock it down because I think the yellow is very strong. More glaze, more glaze. I need this to be very thin, and I can add that to this side, that area that we said we wanted to be a little more yellow. All right, so I'm kind of going over that, and I'm crossing over the line a little bit, but I'm not wet blending. I'm just kind of letting this come over. Now, at first it'll look a little bit milky. It'll act almost like there's a coat of milk over it. I'm actually gonna do a line over here just for fun of this kind of yellow color. But as this dries, it'll become clearer and clearer and clearer and look more and more like a nice wood grain. So in real time, what I'll do is I'll turn the mic off and I will dry this so that you can kind of see how this this glaze makes the whole thing more cohesive and seats all the colors together. All right, so I'll turn the mic off now and you'll see what we're doing, okay? Okay, all right, I think that looks pretty darn good. I'm pretty happy with this. If we were doing a large wooden floor, like we would probably lay out line work every 4 inches to represent every board, individual boards. And we would take the time to paint in all of these steps for every board so that it looks like this is a hardwood floor that's been laid and every individual board is represented. In this case, we've just done one large swatch to kind of see our color choices, our dragging choices, and if our fun little graining brush will do the trick that we want. All right. So that concludes this project. Go ahead and finish off this wood graining project. Find your sample. Do the different parts as breaking down your steps. Follow your steps along. Always know that you may have to adjust a little bit. We added the little scratch marks in using the we could use the back of our brush, or if we needed to, the little point. Or if you're like me, I went ahead and used a little trowel that I had, little palette knife. You can do that sort of thing too if you want to add those kind of features in. So, all right, that's it. We won't be adding this to our cornice project. This is just one of the scene painting techniques. You do need to use the marble though, that goes on your project. So, all right, turn this in, submit your work when you're done, and we will move on in the semester. See you soon. Bye.